Good evening. I'd like to welcome all of you who have joined us this evening. I'm Chitra Mukherjee, and on behalf of Team Chintan and our partners, FES India, I would like to welcome you all today for the discussion on the livelihood potential of circular economy and what it has shown us thus far. Today's webinar is the last of our 6 webinar series on circular economy. We have hosted 6 webinars over the last 3 months to introduce the concept of circular economy and its possibilities, talked about the importance of the repair economy, the plastic challenge to achieving circular economy, and how cities can retrofit for circular economy and livelihoods. The social economic loss and the lockdown due to the COVID-19 has prompted a lot of conversation around environmental issues globally. However, this doesn't take into account either the justice for the marginalized or the inevitable return to status quo without a change in how materials circulate and the way we consume. But there has been a significant societal interest in making a deep change. There have been behavioral shifts globally, acknowledging the need for a paradigm shift that is rooted in equity. Hence, Chintan and FES are hosting these webinars so that we can all be informed and can demand shift in public policy so that the post-COVID-19 path is both equitous and green. And equity implies both access to resources and their consumption. In the last of the series, we'll explore the livelihood potential of circular economy. Circular economy must yield jobs, but what jobs are these? What has it yielded so far? What has it achieved till now? And what kinds of jobs are these? And can circular economy offer livelihoods that build economic and environmental resilience, which will hopefully help India figure out the green job sector ahead? To discuss more on this, we have an amazing panel today. The format for today's session is that we have 4 speakers and they'll each give a brief presentation to share their perspectives. And then we'll open up the floor to give you an opportunity to ask specific questions. The moderator for today's panel is Ms. Shalini Sinha. Ms. Sinha is the India country representative for WIEGO, which is a global research policy network that seeks to improve the status of the working poor in the informal economy. Ms. Sinha's work focuses on developing and documenting decent work and livelihood opportunities for women workers in the informal economy. She's developing a focal cities program for Delhi, which includes supporting member-based organizations of women informal workers in their capacity building and advocacy efforts at the city level. With that, it's over to you, Ms. Sinha.
Thank you, Chitra. And thank you, Chintan, and thank you, FES, for this amazing series of webinars around circular economy. And the last one, and definitely not the least one, is, I think, one of the critical aspects of circular economy that we need to develop and discuss. So jobs and livelihood are central to many of the poor, urban poor particularly. And while the concept of circular economy has talked about a lot of principles around environmental and climate equity, it's also discussed innovation and productivity. Job creation is also one of the pillars around which this discussion needs to harness itself. It's also important to understand that in the large part of the global south, informality is the norm, it's not the exception. Large number of workers work in the informal economy, and the links between informality and poverty cannot be highlighted enough. The COVID crisis, as Chitra mentioned, has highlighted the centrality of livelihood in the lives of urban poor. So in a context like this, it is even more critical that we start talking about livelihood and job opportunities that a concept like circular economy can create for many of the countries, and also a new way of looking at equity and a green economy in which many of the workers, whether they are formal or informal, will get a chance to augment their life and livelihood. So with that very brief introduction, I am going to let the panelists do most of the talking. And the first panelist with us is Dr. Patrick Schroeder. He is a senior research fellow at Chatham House and will be talking about the social dimension of circular economy, jobs, livelihood, and well-being.
Okay, thank you, Shalini, for the introduction. Thank you to Chintan and Friedrich Ebert Stiftung for organizing the event and for inviting me. It's very timely, the whole series and also this topic. And both Chitra and Shalini, both you raised some of the important questions within the circular economy discourse. I don't have answers to all of them. What I plan to do in the 10 minutes that I have is to introduce some of the research that we've been doing over the last 4 years, where we try to highlight some of these issues. And I've prepared a short PowerPoint, which I'm going to share. Just a second. So I hope you can see this.
Yes, it's visible.
And I just need to put it into the other mode. There we go. So, so these are some of the questions that we're trying to think through with our work and our research. The first one, what are the opportunities for livelihoods and local economies in the circular economy? Then how to move towards an inclusive global circular economy, rather to, in contrast to an exclusive local economy. You could see these as two different types of trends with very different outcomes. And the third one relates to the concept of a just transition, which we already know from the discussions about climate and energy, but they're also relevant for the transition from a linear to a circular economy. And so these are also some of the themes that I try to introduce. So what we've seen over the last couple of years is that the social dimension of the circular economy has been receiving some more attention. There's still many gaps and many questions that we need to find more answers to, but we see a shift from the circular economy discussion being very technology and industry focused towards also including of the social dimension. And this is really important because many livelihoods do depend on the circular economy, as also Shalini mentioned, especially informal sector livelihoods and in a range of sectors, not only waste management, but also e-waste and also smallholder agriculture, which is also included in the broader conception of the circular economy. So the shift to regenerative agricultural practices is also considered part of the circular economy. And so this really highlights the need for new circular economy business models which are being developed, that these are inclusive. And this was a report that I co-authored with Richard Gower from Tier Fund back in 2016, where we tried to make a case for the circular economy being important for international development. So we try to present some examples how circular economy models can provide significant benefits for people who are living in poverty. I think that's also, since then, it has changed a little bit by back then. So circular economy was almost absent from the development discourse. That's also beginning to change slightly, as we see increasingly also projects for international cooperation that take on circular economy related topics. One of the observations that we also made back then was that, in fact, many low and middle income countries already have very circular economies because there are many practices of repair and reuse, and but we've also noticed that as countries try, and that's a general trend in development, countries trying to become integrated into global value chains, often countries lose the circularity just because these global value chains and production and consumption systems have been dominantly linear. And it'd be interesting to look now how COVID has already disrupted value chains, and how this development model might now be replaced towards more localized economies, and to see what role the circular economy can play. So following that report, we published another report last year where we focused specifically on plastics. It's the No Time to Waste report, we called it. We did some research about the impact of plastics on livelihoods and especially also people in poverty. And based on this analysis that we had, the linear plastics economy has significant impact on well-being and livelihoods. So it's the cause of many diseases caused by mismanaged waste. The open burning of plastics also is a public health issue. And we very much try to raise awareness with multinational consumer good companies to take plastics pollution more serious and move towards a more circular plastics economy. Especially, I mean, we're trying to highlight also the responsibility of multinational brands. And we had quite some traction on this also with the UK development, back then still differed, and now the FCDO, who initiated a program with Tier Fund later on. So now this is based on some research that we've did in relation to the circular economy and SDGs. So we try to show, this is a bit simplified, but we try to show into which SDGs the circular economy makes some direct contributions. Then we also highlighted where the social dimensions are still not adequately addressed, plus some of the SDGs. And so we see here, there are no poverty, zero hunger, gender equality, and generally the reduced inequalities. So we need to still make some more efforts to demonstrate how the circular economy also can contribute positively to these targets. And the third category that we have here, really, SDG 4, quality education, SDG 16, peace, justice, and strong institutions and partnerships for the goals, SDG 17. These are really necessary to enable the circular economy. So now this is a project that we're working on at Chatham House for the last year and a half. And we have two objectives here. We're looking at the circular economy internationally. And the objective is to provide a strong evidence base of the opportunities and trade-offs in the transition to the circular economy in developing countries. Plus, we try to identify collaborative opportunities at the international level for the inclusive global circular economy, to create some alliances of actors, including governments, NGOs, research, international organizations from UN system, etc., to really make a case for this inclusiveness agenda for the circular economy. So last year and this year, we've been looking at Latin America and Africa. And just last week, we launched our work in the South Asia region, where we organized a workshop together with GIZ India, and brought together stakeholders from Bangladesh and Myanmar, Nepal, India, of course, etc. And So this was a piece that we published earlier this year, where we tried to highlight the connection between the just transition and the circular economy. So if you're interested in this report, it's available for download from the website. But the reason why we're trying to highlight is that although the circular economy can be a win-win situation, it's not automatically everybody will benefit. So there are potential losers in this shift from a linear to a circular economy. And that's why a just transition approach is needed to ensure that those sectors or those communities which might be negatively impacted, also low and middle income countries which heavily rely on linear sectors and export of commodities, basically to ensure that this is in line with the SDG agenda of leaving no one behind. So that's really important in the international context. That's why we also argue that we need strong international cooperation programs, potentially like also global mechanisms with support funds for countries to make this transition. Okay, so from this report, this is a figure that we had here. What we try to show is actually the stakeholders and their needs across the value chains. So if you're a little bit familiar with the circular economy diagrams, which are often used, you have either material flows where you show resources along these different value chains, but often you don't necessarily see the role of people across these different stages in the value chains. So the case we're trying to show here is that in these different stages along the value chain, it's important to engage various stakeholders. So for example, if you go at the material and food supply chains, it's really important to engage these countries and communities that depend on mining and resource extraction or large-scale agriculture to prepare for employment shift and enable transition to higher value economic activities, which are more in line with circular practices. Then in the design and manufacturing stage, this is where the skills agenda becomes really relevant. The manufacturing sector already is facing the challenge of automation, and generally in the circular economy discussions, the digital and automation aspect, or if you call it Industry 4.0, is considered to be coupled to the circular economy to achieve higher resource efficiency in production and manufacturing. We will see a trend towards this, and the question here is really how can the skills base of workers be increased so that we prevent job losses, but also how do we support SMEs in the transition. Then if we look at distribution and use, this is where the consumer plays a crucial role. That's often also not necessarily considered sufficiently because it requires a shift in mindsets, a shift in consumption patterns. The third one, obviously, that's the most frequently discussed issue, and obviously also of huge importance, the working conditions at the end of life, recycling workers, waste pickers, and the collection, how to improve working conditions and reduce the occupational health and safety risks. So I think I'm running out of time. These are just some consideration really about how to engage across value chains. Here's also an issue of unbalanced power relations really between large corporations and suppliers. That can often be an obstacle in changing supply chains towards more circular practices. But it's also, the question is who will capture the value of the shifts from a linear to a circular system. I think Shalini asked that question, where will the jobs be? Where will the jobs go? Who will capture the economic benefits? That's all not so clear. One project that we're just starting now, and it's funded by the European Union, and it's led by the United Nations Industrial Development Organization, is one of those new international development programs, which exactly aims at some of the things that I highlighted earlier, how to support SMEs in developing countries towards more circularity. And here, what we're going to do is we're going to work on two, so Chatham House is part of this project in a larger consortium, which involves a number of other organizations, working on plastics value chains and the garments and textiles value chains. And the objectives here is also to provide finance to SMEs, to have capacity building and create green local jobs. And this will also involve working with some European multinationals along their value chains and support their suppliers in developing countries to adopt these circular practices. This is only starting off, so we have not yet identified the countries nor the companies that were going to be part of that. Oh, yes, so that's all. Thank you for listening. This is my email in case you want to get in touch. Very happy to exchange more information, and we look forward also maybe for cooperation opportunities long down the line. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Schroeder. That was really very enlightening. And without much ado, I want to move on to the next speaker, Mr. Sanjeev Bejbarua, who's Vice President, Corporate EHS from ITC Limited. And he's going to talk about sustainable waste management, waste collectors as the keystone.
Thank you, Shalini, a lot. Just trying to get this video started. Good evening to everyone, all of you. And thanks to Chintan, thanks to FES for asking me to come and speak in this forum. I'm not very sure why you'll have chosen ITC to come and talk in such an august and well-informed forum such as this, because we are kind of a business conglomerate. And I'll be quite upfront. I don't think we understand circular economy very well. And we, however, do have an understanding of solid waste management, though we are not in the business of solid waste management. We have a kind of certain understanding, and that's what I will share with you during the next few minutes. And if there are any kind of mistakes or anything from my side, please keep this perspective in mind, that I'm basically going to be talking about something which I'm not very knowledgeable about. Can you see my screen? Is it visible? Can't hear you.
Yes, sir. Your screen
yes,
is
Sanjeev, it's visible.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So as the title says, it's about sustainable waste management, and with waste collectors as the keystone. Now, ITC, I'll be sharing the ITC perspective, of course, but just to start off with the dimension of the problem. In India, you're talking about a humongous amount of municipal solid waste, most of it which goes unmanaged. And plastic is a constituent part of it, constitutes around 20%. And the reason I'm starting off with plastic, and in fact, this thread of plastic will run through most of the slides that I will share with you, because that's how we really got involved in this problem of municipal solid waste. We actually, as an organization, started working on municipal solid waste around 13 years ago, when we had a problem of sourcing fiber for our paper business. And though India has very good recycling rates in plastic, people talk about a 60% recycling rate. Our paper recycling rates are actually among the lowest in the world. And since we are also in the paper business and needed fiber, we have limitations of sourcing fiber in India locally because of need for land to grow food, etc. So most of our pulp used to come imported, and you had this waste fiber which was literally going to waste. And we started this program about teaching segregation at home, and thereby segregating your wet and dry waste, by which the paper section actually becomes suitable for collection and recycling. And that's how we started. And we got into plastic when the requirements of the plastic waste management rules came up. And what we kind of have understood since is that there are two ways of looking at it. So one way you could look at plastic waste as an indicator, and it's an indicator of the fact that most waste ends up in landfills or dumped across the world. There are very few successful models of what I would call industrial solid waste management. By that I mean that waste is collected, it is transported to a centralized location, and then you have machinery which is segregating the waste into different categories, and then you find some value for the waste. What it literally means, at least in the developed world, most of it goes for incineration for energy. And across the world, and not only in India, solid waste management has succeeded where communities have been actively involved. I mean, this is what we have seen with our own eyes, the projects that we have done. And from whatever literature that we have seen internationally, this also seems to be a common characteristic. If you look at plastic waste as a problem, the catch is that, you get into an iceberg situation. I mean, sure, plastic is a good indicator that your solid waste management system is not working. But if you focus on plastic, what you see is not visible. The focus on plastic also creates, I would say, invested interest. By what I mean is that you create a system to handle plastic. And these system, people who get invested in this system actually create inertia for changing the system where change is required to have a better management of solid waste management. Because I think even in Dr. Schroeder's program, I did notice that point where the issue with municipal solid waste ultimately is the health and sanitation aspect, and which in a country like India is not at all a insignificant issue. But working on plastics actually does give us a lot of insights on the whole issue of solid waste management. And because it's a problematic fraction, we certainly, there is a lot of work to be done, and these insights have been useful. So the question is, you're talking about some 1.5 to something like 4 million people who are directly involved in this solid waste management activities in the collection and the segregation. What happens to them? I mean, when you're discussing these different models, where do they come in, and what do they do? See, there are a lot of solutions that are being talked about, and we appreciate that the discussions on circular economy. But for the last decade and a half, we've been trying to understand the problem and find solutions both upstream and downstream. We can say for certain that it's not a one-size-fits-all kind of a solution. Each geography, each demography, I would say, makeup determines the kind of solutions we'll have to do. And it is an extremely complex equation. Our experience has been pretty significant. We are actually been working across, I think, almost 13 states within the country. Our programs directly connect with around almost 8 million citizens. Our programs deliver livelihoods for almost 15,000 waste collectors, and over 100 plus social entrepreneurs have been created. And at present, around 78,000 odd metric tons of municipal solid waste gets managed annually, sustainably, in the sense that they don't land up in landfills. So if you, with that background, with that understanding, if you were to really look at it, of course, there are issues which have to be done upstream. We have to shrink the problem. We have to improve packaging efficiency. And I think there is a fair amount of work to be done on this, that how do you, package more with less. You use materials that make recycling easier. And here I would kind of, as an example, I mean, all of us talk about multi-layers as a big problem in both environmentally and as a MSW issue itself. And multi-layers, it's not that they are not recyclable. They actually are comprised of very high quality polymers and with a high molecular weight. The problem is the size and its weight. Multi-layers essentially are multiple layers of different types of polymer. So if you were to make recycling easier, it would help if all the layers are from the same polymer. So you're talking about monopolymers. So those are areas that we are working on. Alternative materials, though there is a lot of work to be done and people are talking about bioplastics, compostable plastics. This is very much work in progress, and but activities are on in this area, including paper alternatives. But I mean, whichever route you follow, but I mean, the essence is that we have to shrink the size of the problem. And here, I would also draw attention to the fact that all these discussions, we kind of sort of close our eyes to the unorganized sector. In India, packaging industry, almost 45 to 50% of packaging comes from the unorganized sector. So we're really talking about half the problem lying there. Solution, I mean, design and develop obviously have to take into account, this contribution also. Managing the problem downstream for materials without alternatives or where alternatives are not viable as of present, such as laminates. We have to find out ways of managing the waste in its most sustainable form. I did say that, and we stand by that laminates are recyclable. Mechanical recycling is possible. Chemical recycling, of course, but as of now, it is not really viable. Whereas mechanical recycling is both technically and economically viable. But the key issue is it is possible if only source segregation happens, and if you really kind of look at the whole recycling, I would say value system, what is actually missing is sustainable supply chains for the recycling industry. And that's what needs to be done. And even if one were to say, recycling is not possible for argument's sake, and you talk about energy recovery in cement kilns or in the power industry, we need to keep in mind that, 1 ton of MLP waste delivers almost 34,000 megajoules of energy. We service 1 ton of good quality coal, which will give you around 30,000 megajoules. So without the kind of pollution part of it in terms of the ash content, etc., it would give you more energy. So there are benefits in looking at those applications. So the key points is that any downstream solution for sustainable municipal waste management is dependent on this crucial factor of source segregation. In source segregation, there is no way you can do it without the informal or the formal waste collector. So you can talk about a circular economy, and where the material the flows are closed, or even if you talk about a linear model where the model is at least sustainable in terms of being able to self-sustain. It's again the waste collector who's the essential part of that value chain. And these are programs that we have done across the length and the breadth of the country. We've done it in Bangalore. We've done it in, like I said, 13 states across the country. It's that single point of contact, the municipal collector, who engages directly with the generator of the waste, who can ensure that source segregation continues to be successful. There can be other mechanisms. There could be penalties imposed, for example. But in terms of identifying who actually segregating, how much waste is generation, you need data on the ground. It's the waste collector. And which is why, what we say is that active participation of the urban local bodies, the municipalities, the panchayats, and you can make this behavioral change of citizens towards source segregation of waste, the generating of sustainable livelihood opportunities for waste collectors, workers, waste pickers, and creating an ecosystem for recycling this material is possible. But this whole thing falls apart if the presence of that direct contact with the citizens who generate the waste is removed. And this is our understanding. I'll share one example of what we have done. This is something that we have been doing in Pune in partnership with Swatch and the Pune Municipal Corporation. We desired to be, kind of partner Swatch because they actually have done some amazing work in over the years, reaching out to the citizens, getting source segregation done. And it's a pretty effective model. And, the segregation levels are pretty high. But what we observed and the feedback also which we got from Swatch was that the waste collectors would go, they would pick up the wet and the dry waste separately. The wet waste would go into the Pune Municipal Corporation system, where some of it was diverted for bioenergy, some of it was going for composting. But the dry fraction would be taken by the waste collector. And there was an ecosystem of kabadiwalas, etc., who would pick up all the dry waste. And the only thing which used to be dumped by the roadside by these collectors themselves was these laminates and tin films, because there was no value perceived for this. So what we worked with Swatch in creating that supply chain, linked it with a recycler for whom this was and is raw material which he uses for various applications. And this is actually the shredded MLP, they are kind of converted. We provided the technical support and expertise, converted into granules, and it gets converted to all kinds of plastic products. And I'm giving this as an example because MLP is one of the most difficult fractions at least in the Indian municipal solid waste scenario. So if it can be done with MLP, and I acknowledge that models such as these need to be replicated more, scaled up more, and we are in discussion with a lot of people on this. But if it is possible for MLP, and you are actually what you're doing is you're kind of finding a solution for municipal solid waste in general. So key takeaways, I would say for a circular economy, I understand that is the key, as it would be for a linear model also. But recovery is not from garbage dump. It has to be segregated at source. And we can go around the world. We can follow multiple models. Right now, we're talking about circular economy. Tomorrow, it could be something else. But I think the starting point doesn't change. And we'll always end up at that starting point, source segregation. And this is a point that I would, at the risk of repetition, keep on saying this. Waste collectors are the only one who connect directly with the generators. And here, I mean, in a sense, I have a degree of discomfort with this entire focus on circular economy because it takes your eye away from what are the priorities of the present. it is in some ways similar to, when you're talking about climate change and we talk about, net zero, we take away the focus from the mitigation measures which are required right now. So I would really, really like to kind of, bring the focus back as to what needs to be done now, that we segregate, we measure, we kind of set performance metrics, both for industry, for municipalities, for citizens, whatever, and put in a system where compliance, the cost of compliance essentially becomes, lower than the cost of non-compliance. And this has to be done. New models will definitely emerge. They will evolve as we are talking about circular economy. And the point I made earlier, that the cost of compliance in terms of segregation must be lower than the cost of non-compliance. And this is entirely a governance issue. So people cannot be allowed to get away by not segregating the waste and dumping. And again, waste collectors are the ones who really know the ground situation. And without them, we are flying blind. And since we come from an industry background, we like to work with information. We like to know what's happening on the ground so that, we have that feedback loop. I mean, this goes back to my engineering background, but any, kind of control that you need to put in, any management system that you need to put in, you need to have that feedback loop. And here the feedback loop is the waste collector is a very, very important element of it. And that is why they need protection, they need empowerment, because like I said, and that is why I'm saying that they are the keystone. Without them, whatever efforts that we need to make now and whatever little is being done will fall apart. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We are going to now move on to the third speaker, and I'd let all the speakers speak before summing up at the end. So the third speaker is Mr. Aditya Siroya, co-founder of Repurpose Global, and he'll be speaking about the contribution of repurpose in building livelihoods in a circular economy framework. Mr. Aditya.
Hi, Shalini. Thank you so much. Can you see me and hear me okay?
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining into this webinar. And thank you for inviting me to this really all-star panel. I feel grateful to be along with industry stalwarts, even though we're an early stage sustainability social enterprise. I'm really excited to share our perspective and hopefully have a productive discussion. So I'll try to keep my presentation short. Really, the theme of my presentation is to talk about, is to really continue this theme that Mr. Sanjeev brought up, which is that simply we need to build solutions that are context appropriate. And that's something that we at Repurpose hold very dear at heart. So thank you again for joining. I'll try to be quick through my presentation. Of course, we all know that the plastic waste problem is one of the most pervasive problems that humanity has ever faced, because much like the man in this photo, we are a society that is quite literally drowning in our own consumption. But what often gets overlooked when we talk about plastic waste is the humanitarian crisis that has the unspoken humanitarian crisis that has occurred, where we as a society have offloaded the burdens of our consumption onto millions of informal waste pickers across the world, who are some of the most historically marginalized groups of society. We actually at Repurpose, the three, my co-founders and I, got started in our journey into waste, doing our thesis on informal sector waste management right out of college. And through that, we went from landfill to landfill across India and saw the problem firsthand. And really our summation through that study was that simply nature needs capital. We are not allocating enough capital and financing to the problems of plastic pollution, both human and environmental. Just a recent report from the Breaking the Plastic Wave showed that we are on track to triple our plastic use and consumption and plastic leakage into nature actually by 2040. But the good news is that over 80% of that leakage can be solved by investing in existing solutions alone on a systemic level. And so it's very clear that there is no one silver bullet to plastic pollution. We need to be investing in every solution across the plastic value chain, right from upstream reduction and designing for circularity, which, as Mr. Sanjeev rightly pointed out, is a longer term solution, all the way to investing in end of the line waste management infrastructure. Across the board, we need to be doing everything we can to create a systemic change to these problems that are so pervasive. One of our key findings was that across the world, despite these, or rather in response to the salient environmental and human problems that plastic waste in our consumption causes, thousands of innovators across the world, be it social enterprises, non-profits, or even cooperatives like Swatch, have risen up to solve the challenges, both human and environmental, establishing efficient and ethical waste management systems that intercept waste before it reaches the environment, while at the same time helping transition existing informal workers into more formalized and dignified livelihoods. But the fact is, despite these organizations propagating across India and across the world, they remain confined to quite a small scale. And when we were doing our research, we realized, okay, why is it that despite these people having a proven track record of impact, why is it that they remain confined to this small scale? And we found that simply the answer was a lack of access to capital. Waste management is a historically and notoriously underfunded sector. Just as a depressing example, really, more money has gone into WeWork, which we all know what happened to that, than every recycling startup in the history of the last 25 years. And that's something that we think is a clear sign of why we face this problem today, because even though we have the solutions like organizations such as Swatch, which are admirable, we're simply not allocating enough capital to help those organizations scale up their impact. Now that's in stark contrast, and rather because of the pervasiveness of the plastic pollution problem, it's clear that consumers are demanding action from brands. CPG products have grown, that are marked sustainable, have grown 560% faster than conventional ones. And 80% of consumers across the world are looking to switch to brands that are taking action on this issue that they care about, because plastic has become the #1 environmental issue in the minds of consumers, because it's such a tangible and pervasive issue that even my grandmother, who's not very educated about the environmental crisis, can see that plastic waste on a beach choking a turtle somewhere just simply does not make sense, and therefore feels frustrated at the brand that she sees on the label of that product. I think some high-level observations that we took away was that simply too much plastic waste is too low value to be economically incentivizing existing solutions to divert them away from nature. Across the world, we see waste management infrastructure is underfunded globally, and reduce or reuse solutions, while exciting and definitely holding a lot of potential, are simply too low scale, either from a cost perspective, from a quality perspective, or from even just a sustainability perspective, to compete in the market with some of the existing offerings that we have with plastic. Now, that was a thesis that, or some of the observations that led to our work at Repurpose Global. And just a quick plug about what we do. Our goal is to help consumer brands across the world take impact and embed environmental action into their product by taking responsibility for their plastic consumption. So we are pioneering this concept of plastic credits to unlock financing from brands who use plastic in their own packaging and mobilize this financing in favor of existing solutions across the world, solutions like a Swatch, who have a proven track record of creating impact in their local context. So our core innovation is the plastic credit, which essentially is a representation of environmental impact, where each plastic credit represents 1 kilogram of plastic additionally avoided or removed from the environment. And the goal here is to monetize and expand the value of the material, unlocking capital, hopefully creatively, from brands across the world, not just through regulatory means, but through voluntary means, really tapping into the consumer demand that brands can satisfy by taking action on this issue that their consumers care really about. So on a high level, we have a two-sided ecosystem that we're creating through our marketplace, where on the one hand, we connect consumer brands who use plastic in their own packaging to waste management partners across the world who use that financing to invest in additional plastic waste recovery and expand and scale up the impact. Our platform is essentially, we are taking this platform approach because our theory of change is very much that the existing solutions that are across the world adapted to their local context are the ones that are best suited to solving some of the most salient problems that we see in plastic waste management. And our goal as a young social enterprise is to unlock financing and technical support in favor of these existing organizations such that we can scale up their impact. So we are proud to be working with some of the most innovative and inclusive waste management, social enterprises, nonprofits, and even cooperatives across the world, from Colombia to Haiti to Ghana to Kenya to across India, with many organizations in India, from Goa to Kerala to even Bangalore. And so the goal here is really to create this platform approach where we aggregate waste management solutions and share learnings across them and create a network that can fundamentally change the problem at scale. I'd like to quickly give you some case studies of how we create impact, and in the process, touch on the livelihoods problem that we're talking about today. I think there is a tremendous potential, as Mr. Sanjeev pointed out, in tapping into the existing economies around waste management and transitioning them into formalized and dignified livelihoods by unlocking the power of these organizations that are, I think, fundamentally have this right ethos, right, of not only creating efficiency, but also ethicality in their operations. So just to give you some examples, or rather the process through which we work, our goal is to tackle plastic removal by activating, financing, and verifying. Sorry, is there
We lost you for a moment.
Oh, apologies. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Oh, where did you lose me?
Just at the beginning of the slide. So
okay. Yeah, so I'll just go into a little bit of our process before I go into some case studies, and then I'll wrap up quickly. Our goal is to very much identify existing organizations that have this proven track record of impact in their local context, and activating those organizations to create interventions that generate both additional plastic waste recovery, while at the same time also creating expanded social impact by a better inclusion of the workers that they're involved with. Then we mobilize financing from brands across the world who are looking to embed impact into their communications. And then finally, we verify that this impact has occurred as promised once we've received that financing and deployed it on the ground with our impact partners. So a couple of examples that I'd like to give on a high level across through which we think these existing social enterprises are so well poised to generate livelihoods that are not only holding true to this concept of a circular economy, but also an ethical economy. First is recovery of plastic waste with no economic value. As Mr. Sanjeev pointed out, multi-laminate packaging, or MLP, is often one of the most problematic waste materials. And that's fundamentally because there is no value to the material, right? Unlike a material like PET, we see a huge problem in that the existing local infrastructure is simply not incentivized to deal with this material. And so we saw a funding gap. And so our answer to that was to use plastic credit financing to expand the monetizable waste stream for existing incumbent waste collectors, such that they are incentivized to ethically collect this material. And so that's the first intervention type that we generate. Our second intervention type is to tackle what we see as the infrastructure gap in waste management, particularly in rural areas where there is a fundamental lack of infrastructure for waste management. And essentially the goal here is to mobilize financing to set up end-to-end supply chains for villages or rural regions that lack infrastructure, and therefore the local residents are dumping this material into the environment. And then finally, our third intervention, which is much more experimental, and therefore I won't go too much into it, is to scale up innovations that are replacing the need for plastic altogether, and in the process, moving us beyond the paradigm of plastic itself. I think we're really proud to be working with some really innovative partners, and as Mr. Sanjeev pointed out, low-value plastics and waste pickers hold really the key to solving this problem at the end of the day. And so our goal here is to expand the capacity of existing waste management organizations. I'd love to give you the example of two. First is V-Recycle, a small waste management social enterprise in Goa, where their entire model is really to expand the capacities of local recyclers in the informal economy. And their model is quite small scale, but the goal is to help mobilize the financing in their favor to educate existing recyclers and train them on how to collect additional material that they are currently rejecting, particularly low value plastics that they are economically unincentivized to collect, and then transition over time those workers into more formalized and dignified livelihoods by formally employing them in V-Recycle's material recovery facility. So here the goal is to expand the use plastic credits to both recover additional material by creating a subsidy on the material itself, and that subsidy makes it both economically incentivized to collect the material and also covers the cost of the socioeconomic inclusion programs that V-Recycle runs in order to help transition the existing informal workers into more dignified livelihoods. I'll give you one more example. This is a little bit more about the V-Recycle model itself. But as you can see, it's sort of a pretty holistic model, as Mr. Sanjeev was pointing out, where you have to tap into the existing last mile, or rather first mile, depending on how you look at it, infrastructure that already exists, and try to use that or leverage that in order to collect the material that is not being collected today. And so V-Recycle is doing exactly that, where they've already employed and upskilled 10 formalized waste pickers in their small material recovery facility. And the goal is to expand that, to continue to expand that through the financing that we are able to mobilize in their favor. A second example that I like to give you is, as I said, around strategic investments of infrastructure. And here we're really proud to be partnering with an organization called Greenworms, a social enterprise in Kerala, which has this proven model of setting up end-to-end waste management supply chains in a unique PPP model with local village panchayats. As we all know, village panchayats have been consigned the responsibility of setting up waste management supply chains for their regions, but they often are under capacity, right? And they don't have necessarily the know-how, the technical know-how, or even the operational resources to be able to execute these. And so Greenworms as an organization, their theory of change is to partner with existing village panchayats and set up end-to-end supply chains for waste management. Here, I think it's the ideal system of waste management where local women can be employed from self-help groups, either women from marginalized backgrounds or youth requiring employment. And so the goal here is to employ these women formally as professional waste collectors, right? Not as informal workers, but rather as professional waste collectors who go from door to door, train residents on how to segregate waste at source, and then finally collect all of the segregated waste, bring it up to a collection facility that we set up in that village, where that material can be segregated and fed into the hub and spoke model that Greenworms already operates through the existing material recovery facility. And we think this sort of decentralized model of waste management is the way to go, because not only does it generate livelihoods at every link of the supply chain, but also it allows for efficient and ethical recovery of material. Previously in the villages that Greenworms operates, the material is often dumped directly into water bodies or openly burnt because of the lack of access to any sort of formalized collection system. But now through this holistic model of impact, we think it's allowing over 90% of material recovery in these villages. And the goal is to continue to use plastic credit financing to scale up the number of supply chains that we can set up, and in the process continue to expand the livelihood potential of the circular economy. And so I like to stop here with a story maybe of Elizabeth, a supervisor at Saha Zero Waste. And I think this quote from her on the screen is just really, I think, a sign that, or a mentality shift that we need to have, that at the end of the day, waste pickers are not, they are playing such a crucial role to society, right? And so anyone involved in the waste industry has had stigma associated with it, that it's and that's historically true in India, and we think it's a shift that we need to have, that at the end of the day, this is a really crucial environmental role that they're playing, because it is serving as the entry point to recycling, not just in India, but across the world. And that's why we think it's really important to focus on the socioeconomic angle when we're looking at circular economy, not just looking at the efficiency, which is often the terms that we talk about this through. So I'd like to invite you to join us in doing our bit. I think if we all just did our bit, we can progress towards an ethical and efficient circular economy. Thank you so much again, Shalini, and the entire panel, Chintan, for having us here. And I really appreciate the time and excited for the discussion after this as well.
Thank you very much. And now we move on to the final speaker for this evening, Ms. Maria Hughes. She is a specialist in carbon neutral circular economy and works with Citra, and will be speaking about towards a circular economy, how to ensure a fair journey.
Thank you very much. And I am very, very glad to be here talking today. We've heard a bunch of very, very interesting and inspiring presentations, I think, today. So I'm very happy to give my quick contribution. So let's start. First of all, I will start with a little bit of where I'm from. Citra is a Finnish innovation fund. The Finnish Innovation Fund, we are a think and do and connect tank that actually operates directly under the Finnish Parliament. The core and the background of our existence is to ensure a successful Finland of tomorrow. So in that way, we very much work on a Finnish perspective. But however, here someone might think that, well, why are we working also on circular economy, for example, on an international level? But when we talk about global challenges and the global phenomenon, it's clear that the best way for us to support a sustainable future is actually by collaborating on a global level and working together. And as I can show you there, actually the core of our working is the building our future together. Today I will be talking about a bit about the fairness of circular economy. And actually in the core of this is the fact that when a lot of things are what we see in Citra as a vision is that we have to guarantee a fair future for everyone, but the only thing we actually know is that everything will change. This will have some positive impacts, but as we've heard also today, it might also have some negative impacts on certain parts of society. Well, why circular economy? We are facing major global challenges, which we often see as a kind of a group of three. These challenges have not gone anywhere despite the pandemic. And this is why, of course, the webinar series now has been very timely. A circular economy is a part of the solution, a tool to tackle these challenges, as 62% of greenhouse emissions are from material production. 1 million species face extinction, and globally less than 10% of materials are recycled. However, circular economy is a tool, but it's not only about recycling. It's actually a systemic change to our for our current economic system, where natural resources are actually used in the boundaries of the earth. Central, why I'm actually bringing out this here is that central for circular economy is actually the business models, as Dr. Schroeder earlier said. We need circular economy business models that differ from the current linear business models. And this is really in center when we talk about the societal impacts of a circular economy. A circular economy has also a lot of opportunities, and that's again one of the reasons why it is seen as a tool for our more sustainable future. So, well, first of all, the economic opportunities that have been assessed for a circular economy are huge. Up to $4.5 trillion could be that additional global economic output of a circular economy in 2030. Then again, also the potential for new circular economy related jobs on a global scale is 1.8 million jobs. This is based on a research conducted by the OECD on OECD countries. In addition, the circular economy can increase the accessibility of products, and services. It can keep the value of materials, even increase the value of materials, and increase appreciation of materials and products, in addition to keeping materials actually in use. So this was a quick into a circular economy, of which, of course, we've heard about a lot today and during the previous webinar series. However, it's really, really important to bring out what a circular economy could look like so that we can actually look at the potential impacts on livelihoods. Here I've presented some a categorization of circular economy business models. What does a circular economy actually look like on the on an operation level. We've heard about several of them today, starting from resource efficiency and recycling to renewability, for example. But these all are actually a key in the transition to a circular economy. And they all, of course, also have their impacts on jobs and livelihoods and well-being. So now from circular economy business models, we can now get to the question of increasing well-being through a circular economy. And what does fair mean? As you saw already in our vision in the previous slide, we really like the word fair at Citra. But then you have to ask, well, what does fair even mean? It's a bit of a problematic word because it is very subjective. However, it does bring out actually the core approach of Citra's work on circular economy. The world will have to change. We all know that, but how should we do it without leaving anyone behind? I'll now look at the fairness of a circular economy from the perspective of livelihoods. For example, how the transition to a circular economy will increase jobs in some sectors, but also reduce them in others. Here also have to point out that of course we have a strong, the amount of the proportion of the informal labor market in Finland is very small. So a lot of our work actually is directed to the formal labor market, which in comparison to a lot of the interesting presentations we've heard today. But first of all, a circular economy will have effects on our livelihoods. And we have to try to identify them. We have to try and we have to take them into account. Adopting the circular economy business models I just presented to you, for example, the transition from production and owning products to service-based models will affect livelihoods across the value chain that are global, as we very well know. I think here what Dr. Schroeder said about Chatham House seeing how societies have been circular before, but after adopting global value chains have become linear. So in a way here we could see that what we need to do is going back from our linear or modifying our linear global value chains to circular global value chains. So as we've heard today, the social dimension of the circular economy is fundamental. At the same time, also, as we've already heard today, it's not yet very widely understood in the same way as environmental or economic opportunities and impacts of circularity. Citra recently published a list of inspiring circular economy solutions from around the globe. These solutions were asked to identify their social impacts. And what was interesting to see was that a lot of solutions were able to identify, especially saw themselves impacting their consumers, increasing sustainable consumption, providing accessible services, and increasing the well-being of their consumers. Less so, or it was more challenging to identify the impact on jobs, on communities, for example. This, of course, was a very small portion. And actually, we are still continuing on looking on social impacts, and we're just about to finalize a study on the social impact and the jobs of a circular economy. Well, as I said, new jobs will emerge from circular economy, but and here what's important is to, of course, we can talk about the quantity of jobs, millions or hundreds of thousands, but also the quality. Do the jobs connected to the circular economy increase? Are the working conditions appropriate? Is the salary livable, for example? And another key question is that jobs will be lost in sectors relying to the use of fossil fuels and primary production. At the same time, and we need to balance. What we need to do is to build a bridge between the created jobs and the lost jobs. Also, what is important is to embed circularity into all jobs. So what we have are estimates of the job impact, the impacts of a circular economy on jobs on a general level, and then we have case examples on a grassroots level. Many of the circular economy business models are still not yet mainstream, so there's not a lot of information on actual trends. I mentioned the list of inspiring circular economy solutions previously, and here I'm actually, I thought to bring out some different case examples. For example, through upcycling solar panels and refurbishing them, you can also provide renewable energy for off-grid areas. Blend Hub provides a food as a service platform which combines a portable factory unit and cloud-based software. Through their operation model, they are able to increase the localized production of food and shortening in that way the value chain of food production. Flow2 is a sharing platform for assets and personnel. And Arca Innovations is an Indian company that has created the Anandi pad, which is a sanitary pad made from biodegradable materials. So it's circular, and it has both a direct impact on the well-being of women, and it also directly employs women. Just as a final point, Dr. Schroeder pointed out the role of education as an enabler for the circular economy, and how that has to be supported. And actually, this is something that we see very strongly also at Citra. And on a Finnish level, we've been supporting, or we've been embedding the circular economy into education. And at the moment, 100,000 children and young people in Finland are studying circular economy this school year. In addition to this, as has been brought out, a circular economy will also require the possibility to learn new skills, for workers to learn new skills, to reallocate their work towards the circular economy jobs, so as to say. And we have to provide an opportunity to this. I will, as a final quote, I would like to bring out a quote from an interviewee of our recent study on the social impacts of a circular economy. That it's really what we have to remember is that the circular economy should work for everyone in our communities and not just for the most fortunate. I really find that this is a very, very welcome question, that the impacts of a circular economy on livelihoods, on well-being is increasing. We'll actually be, as this is the last webinar of this series, I can give you a bit of an ad for the similar topic. So we'll actually be holding together with the International Institute for Sustainable Development and Circular Economy a webinar on a just transition to a circular economy and on the employment perspective, trends and visions, just in a few weeks' time. It's an online webinar and it's open for all. I think it starts at 6 p.m. Indian time, so please welcome there. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. That was indeed very, very interesting and a stellar panel to reflect on the questions that we set out to in this final webinar of this series. So we started by asking the livelihood potential of circular economy. And then the four panelists took us on a very interesting journey where both the examples from the ground as well as some theoretical issues were examined to address the issue of livelihood potential. So our first speaker, while dwelling on the social dimensions of circular economy, talked about the opportunities for livelihood and local economies and how to move towards an inclusive global circular economy. Talking about global debates, he also highlighted the linkages with the SDGs, identifying some of the gaps that have been that exist or need to be explored a little bit more, but also talked about the global value chain and how can we talk about a just transition so that a just global transition, so that everybody moves and everybody benefits from this transition. Integrating the most marginalized and the poor, and also which has a role in addressing questions around decent work, equity, improving skill base, and addressing occupational and health risks. Our next speaker spoke about his experience with ITC and talked about the role of waste pickers and the importance of recovery, particularly in circular economy, and the role that is played by waste pickers as segregation. He also shared some discomfort with some of the current discussions, which take away from some of the critical issues, and highlighted the need for building and empowering the waste pickers who are doing this important role. Also asked for, advocated for sort of building cost of compliance into some of these discussions. The third speaker, Mr. Aditya from Repurpose, was very interesting journey that he shared with us about from his research onto what he set out to do to support and enable scaling up. He talked about his platform approach, which is to create network and cross-learning, and also to create or bring some kind of financial upscaling, financial support for upscaling some of these good practices that exist. And finally, our final speaker, Maria from Citra, talked about building a future together and talked about a fair future, pointing out to us that jobs will be created and jobs will be lost, but keeping the lens of fair transition, of creating jobs that are fair, of always sort of examining local and global effect on livelihood, and continuing to explore the a little relatively less explored aspect of social impact of circular economy. So thank you very much, speakers, for a very interesting and insightful discussion. I think what I would like to say in conclusion simply is that, creation of jobs or creation of jobs and loss of livelihoods should be a central anchor and can be a central anchor which can be included in the current discussions on circular economy. And as one of the panelists speaks, that leave no one behind should be at the crux, at the core of this transition from a linear economy to a circular economy. Many people talked about waste pickers playing an integral part in this, but I think there were also people alluded to other sectors and job creation and other sectors, particularly entrepreneurship. And it has great deal of significance for a country economy like India, where a lot of people are self-employed. So, but then it needs to be married with enterprise building, it needs to be married with skill upgradation, and it also needs to be married by the global value chains that exists. So jobs will be created, but what kind of jobs? Where the lens of decent work, the lens of empowerment cannot be taken away as we discuss circular economy in cities. Thank you. One other thing I do want to add, I'm sorry, and one other thing I do want to add is that as we look at this, I think whose jobs are being lost and whose are being created, the gendered impact is also something that we need to constantly engage with in our debates on social dimensions of circular livelihood.
Thank you so much, Shalini, for that. Thank you for moderating that great panel. We had some very interesting perspectives from speakers around the world. And now I'd invite Samuel, if you could just open the floor for questions, if you could just read out the questions, Samuel. Samuel,
we
you're on.
can't hear you. We can't hear you.
Samuel.
So sorry, I'm so sorry. Good evening, everyone. Before we formally open up the question and answer session, I would request the panel to please unmute themselves and open their videos as well. Mr. Siroya and Dr.
It's
Schroeder.
not letting me turn on the video, Samuel.
All right, I think that's right. So great. So we have everyone. My first question is addressed to Dr. Schroeder. So Dr. Schroeder, the question is, there's a difference between reuse, repair, and recycling. In your report, the three are often used as a single category to explain the whole concept of circular economy. Firstly, the skill sets are quite different for repair and recycling. Secondly, could you talk a little bit about the livelihood opportunities in the reuse system?
Yes, absolutely. That's a very very important point. The skills for repair or recycling, they're very different, and they're again different if we look at different sectors. So, and yeah, we haven't actually looked at this in detail. There's definitely more work to be done in this area. So the other question about the livelihoods in the reuse part, that's a very interesting question. And I must admit, that's also a tough one if we're looking at reuse business models, for example. So business models around the reuse of, I don't know, plastics or other materials or products, electronics, etc. Many of these are only just emerging. However, I think generally reuse is a very important aspect of sustainable livelihoods already. Many of these practices, I would say, are not necessarily formalized at the moment. So I guess what I could say is that we need to understand better the existing reuse patterns that we have, and then think about, again, how these can be transformed into business models, how to finance these, and then at the same time ensure that livelihoods which support those reuse practices are not dispossessed, but they are then benefiting from this type of formalization and taking it to another level, if that makes sense. I don't have a concrete example, unfortunately, but I say that if somebody is interested in exploring this work, I think there's quite some potential in that.
Right, thank you for that answer, Dr. Schroeder. My next question is addressed to Mr. Besbarua. So, sir, from your presentation, is there a clear framework in your project to empower women to use the waste to boost their livelihoods and reduce the socioeconomic gendered gaps prevalent in most parts of the country? Is there any focus towards women?
I won't say there is a focus, but I think it's almost incidental that a significant portion of them are women. Okay. And for example, if you look at Swatch, it is almost completely women, but of course that is Swatch's project. And where we work, we use existing, municipal employed waste collectors. I mean, not say waste employed directly by them, but they are part of the ecosystem as they exist. So we don't bring in anybody separately. We work with what exists there. And it is a mix of both women and men. We don't have anything specific, which is gender specific. Yeah.
Right. My next question is for Mr. Siroya. So have you thought about funding projects which separate non-biodegradable and non-compostable materials from the biodegradable and compostable material, so that we don't have to take up the idea of incineration?
Yeah, I think to some extent that's precisely what we seek to do, right? I think our solution is very much that we seek to mobilize additional financing for additional plastic recovery through the plastic credit financial instrument. And the modality of how that plays out on the ground, we actually try to build on the core competencies of the existing organization that is implementing the intervention. So the goal is very much to allow them to generate additional recovery. That could be through setting up a new collection facility where material can be collected directly from households through trained and professionally employed workers who go from door to door, bring that, teach residents on how to segregate waste, and then bring back that segregated waste to a collection center and further process the waste into every material stream such that every material stream can be sent to its appropriate end destination. That's one intervention type. The other intervention type could lead to just a subsidization on problematic materials that are simply not getting collected. So in essentially incentivizing the material to get separated out of the general solid waste stream and be collected and sent to its appropriate end destination in that manner, right? So I think our goal is that we are intervention agnostic, so to speak, as long as there is this concept of additionality being met. And so hopefully that answers your question, Samuel. But one other alternative example there is that we're actually trying to fund also through plastic credits the use of alternatives to plastic that can replace the need for plastic altogether. So one intervention that we're working with is Sathi pads. They've generated a biodegradable and completely compostable sanitary pad that replaces plastic for every pad used because the traditional sanitary pad uses a lot of plastic. So here what we're doing is through plastic credit financing, subsidizing the distribution of these pads to low-income women and girls who might not be able to otherwise afford this option. So because it is a little bit more pricey than compared to the regular status quo option. So I think there are lots of integration opportunities for plastic credits. The goal is to mobilize financing in favor of these existing innovators on the ground.
Right. Thanks for that answer, Mr. Suroya. My next question is for Ms. Hughes. Are there any negative impacts of circular economy?
Thank you. I think that is a very good question and a very relevant question as circular economy is hyped about a bit, I think, at the moment. I think as a concept, if we lived in a utopistic world, as a concept, circular economy works. It really aims for us to use sustainably our materials, our resources, but it has risks. The one risk we've heard about today is including the social dimension of a circular economy or the social dimension has to be included. For example, we don't know, we are talking about shortening, increasing refurbishment of products, reusing materials a lot, which is very needed. But how will it affect the global value chain? How will the global value chain, how will the primary production recover from if the use of materials, for example, increases a lot? And these are there are key questions. Another is actually that we cannot simply reduce or increase our resource efficiency and reduce the use of our materials to increase production. So we have to also reduce our consumption, because otherwise our impacts on our environment are not going to be reduced. So these are, I think, two major risks. But as a concept in a utopistic world, it works, in my opinion, but it needs a lot of work to actually be realized, and the risks have to be identified and tackled.
Right, thanks for that, Ms. Hughes. I will come back to Mr. Bezbarua. So my next question for you is, knowing that cigarette butts are quite a sizable portion of the non-biodegradable waste which is created in the municipal stream, and they're largely polymers and they don't degrade easily as well, are there any plans of replacing this with compostable material from your organization's perspective?
Okay, in terms of the dimension of the problem for the entire Indian tobacco industry, I think we are talking about 7,000 metric tons of, around 7,000 metric tons of, these cellulose acetate, which is kind of used by the industry annually, against municipal waste dimension of around 50, 60 million tons is what we are talking about. So in terms of the size of the problem, it's pretty small. And it is, of course, all are, as of now, these are plant-based cellulose acetate. So it's not really, strictly speaking, a polymer in that sense. It is all wood-based. And but yes, we know the fact that it has a kind of issue about low degradability, and we are in the pursuit of looking at solutions for that.
Great, thank you for that, Mr. Bezarwa. I'll come back to Mr. Siroya. My next question to you is, which are the organizations that you are giving plastic credits to? Are these, is there a CSR element that is utilized, or generally aware organizations? You mentioned about the consumer demand. How is that exhibited?
Yeah, so our theory of change is very much that it's actually operating outside of the regulatory framework, right? So of course, extended producer responsibility requires brands to take action on the packaging that they're putting into the environment. But what you see is that EPR rules are quite far away from coming to existence in countries like the US. But there is still this latent demand, right, that is not being met, where consumer-facing brands, CPG brands, use plastic in their own packaging, and who are demanded from their consumers to do something about it. They can't really flip a switch overnight and get rid of that plastic. So there's no real option for those brands to meet that latent consumer demand. So what we're tapping into is this voluntary incentive for consumer brands to tap into the consumer incentive here and focus on financing impact essentially as a way to build their brand, right? I think here the hypothesis underlying Repurpose's model is that fundamentally, the ad spend traditionally has been inefficient in the sense that today consumers respond more to impact-driven initiatives than traditional ad spend initiatives, right? And so the goal here is to use the stories that these brands are enabling through the impact creation on the ground to tell those stories to their consumers in a genuine and transparent way, right? That as a brand that we are trying to do something about it. Of course, this is the start of the journey and we have a long way to go in terms of actually reducing our plastic usage, but we're putting our money where our mouth is. We're doing something about it today and investing in solutions in places where the problem is most salient, because we also have to keep in mind that the problem of plastic waste is most salient in places where waste management infrastructure is completely lacking. And so the goal here is to mobilize financing from additional sources in addition to the regulatory frameworks through tapping into this voluntary incentives. I would call our solution more like voluntary EPR from brands that want to do this in over and above what they are required to do by regulation.
Right. Thanks a lot, Mr. Siroya. So my last question is to the whole panel, and it's a fairly lengthy question, but a very pertinent one. So the question says, a part of critique of the circular economy is that it is still a concept that is discussed within intellectual circles and not a policy-led practice. Unless there is a mindset change in resource use of producer companies, brands, luxury brands, and services like Amazon, the change would never be transformative and will remain just a good practice. So how can we break down the concept of circularity and educate masses on the same? And how can we ensure responsibility from producers and service providers, nationals or internationals, and luxury brands to become a part of the whole concept of circular economy? I would like the opinions of the whole panel on that. Ms. Hughes, if you would like to begin.
Yes, I can begin. It's a very relevant question again, but also lengthy. So I will take one perspective on this, and it's actually the value of materials that at the moment we do not set a high enough value for the materials provided by our environment. And I think this is a good one. We've talked a lot about plastic waste, about the importance of waste collection, and these questions are extremely relevant. But actually, one also relevant question is that how come does the plastic after a single use become waste? How come is its value reduced in a way that it does not, that it's not, that it's treated as waste, that it's disposed? And I think the change in this through policymaking, through different ways, is actually one of the ways to actually realize the concept, as the poser of the question said, actually on a horizontal way, or on a horizontal level.
Right. Thank you for that, Ms. Hughes. Mr. Bez Barwa, any perspective on that?
Okay. See, I think what we have to understand, and I think Maria did have this point in her slide, that the way are headed, change is inevitable. I mean, that's something that we have to understand, and whether you call it circular economy or an extreme recycling economy, I really wouldn't know, I mean, at this point of time. But I think it's important to understand that it will bring about disruptive change, and it will maybe even create serious advantages for those economies who are better prepared for change. And countries like India, frankly speaking, whether we have the capacity, whether we have the institutional capacity, the knowledge capacity for making those changes, I don't know. But as a society, we will have to gear up for change, which is inevitable. And an important part in preparing for this, the new challenges of the future, I think, is to create trust between different sections of society. I mean, we all need to be aligned on this need, for the, whether you call it the changes which will happen because of climate risk, environmental stress. These are very real. And it's high time that as a society, collectively, we get around to, being ready for that problem.
Right. Mr. Siroya, Dr. Schroeder, if you would like to add anything.
Yeah, maybe I can go. I think I'll be very quick. I think it's really important, right? Because there's so many armies of, I guess, misinformation being portrayed in terms of keeping the masses in the dark. I think it's really important to make sustainability and circular economy concepts accessible, right? And not only to the masses, but also to the brands, right? Oftentimes when you look at brands, you look at only the largest conglomerates in the world, but oftentimes small and medium businesses get left behind. And oftentimes, and that's sort of the businesses that Repurpose is focusing on. And oftentimes we are the first sustainability solutions provider that they've ever been contacted by, because unlike the Coca-Colas of the world, they don't have armies of sustainability consultants at their disposal. And so sustainability remains cost and effort prohibitive for them to enact. And so our goal is to very much make sustainability and action on circular economy as accessible as possible through this concept of plastic credits is one avenue. I think on the consumer side of things, it's really tough, right? But I think inevitably the consumer mindset is changing, and that's because of the pervasiveness of plastic, right? I think there is this benefit of waste being such a pervasive and tangible and visible material that it has moved a lot of action, right? Unlike carbon, it's much more difficult for the average consumer to understand. But I do think that there is a lot of positive change being brought about just by consumer organizing and consumer-led action, right? Demanding change from brands and even from governments. So I think I'm very optimistic about the future, particularly about the next generation, the generation after me, because they are so vocal and active about demanding change from the folks who can change it.
Dr. Schroeder, if you'd like to add anything.
Sure, yes. I really like the point that Mr. Bisbaro made about the trust. It's really important also to build trust between countries, really to move ahead together on this, to build cooperation. I think, yeah, it's no country can make this transition on its own. So it does require international cooperation. And I mean, the bigger question is whether we need to move away from a neoliberal competitive economic system as we have at the moment to ensure that it's also becoming inclusive. And I mean, the question is right that this is very much dependent on policy. So it's a policy-driven process, at least at this stage. And we see policies emerging. An example in the EU with the Green New Deal and the Circular Economy Action Plan. But we've also seen in our work across Latin America and Africa that increasingly governments putting in place roadmaps and action plans, and there are regional alliances forming of like-minded governments who think that the circular economy is important. Having said this, there are already many successful businesses who operate and also successfully apply circular principles. Some of them are very successful, and they've been doing that for quite a while. I'd like to mention always Elon Musk and his SpaceX program, for example. They're using circular economy principles for their rockets, and they've managed to save millions of dollars and become very competitive. So it also shows these principles are can be used across many different industry sectors. There was something else I forgot now. Yes, no, coming back to the trust issue, I think, I think that's key to have this international cooperation. And I think your webinar also maybe to have this dialogue hopefully contributes to that as well.
Thank you so much. We cannot take more questions than this as we are really running short of time. I would now like to invite Ms. Manvi Kulshresht, who is currently working as a program advisor at our partner organization, FES India, to say a few concluding words. Over to you, Manvi.
Thank you. Firstly, I would like to thank the panelists for such such wonderful insights, and also Shalini for the smooth ride, for taking us through this session. I mean, it was the last session, and I think one of the more informative ones. For everyone else, a very good evening to you. Just for your information, I am Manvi. I work as program advisor with Friedrich Ebert Stiftung India office, and I'm joined here today by my colleague Anurag Shankar. And though it is a little late in the day, but I just want to tell you a bit about our organization. And we started with the introduction in the first webinar, but since it's the close and since we won't see each other again for some weeks now, so here is a quick peek into our work. Anurag and I work in a unit called Economy of Tomorrow for Friedrich Ebert Stiftung in the office, where we look at the transformative discourses dealing with three mega trends in India, that is energy transformation, urbanization, and digital automation. All of these also from the climate change and future of work perspective. So you can see actually how this whole series was fitting in nicely into the work that we do. The two other important aspects of our work are labor and industrial relations, and also gender and social justice. And as part of the social justice, gender justice and climate justice is really important, really important for us. This series of webinar has been very educative and informative for us, and we hope for you too. In each of the webinars, we have touched upon an important aspect of circular economy, starting from creating a conceptual framework, or then delving deep into the subconcepts like repair economy, waste minimization, EPR, importance and role of informal sector like we heard today, and also the livelihood opportunities that the circular economy presents. I hope, I can see from the participant list that there were a lot of people who have been with us for all the 6 webinars, and it's really heartening to see that. And of course, for each of these topics, there is scope for further exploration. What is even better is that for all the themes that we had a diverse representation of actors and stakeholders, providing us with a 360-degree view of the same, from all perspectives, from corporate, social, environmental, political, even like in our last webinar. and also an honest and open discussion with the participants. We see a lot of questions in the chats and a lot of appreciation as well as information exchange going on in the chat there. So that's also really good to know that people are, very actively involved to see that. So, and for all of this, I would like to thank all the experts, resource persons, facilitators, and participants present today as well as in the previous sessions. Thank you so much for your valuable inputs and showing faith in this endeavor. We look forward to further engagements with you and hope to be able to connect with you beyond the scope of these discussions. And there is a lot of talk about exchanging email addresses and getting to know the presentations deeply. So I guess we are moving in the right direction. And most importantly, I would like to thank our partners, Chintan here, Bharti, Ira, Chitra, Samuel, Saran, for conceptualizing and curating and implementing a successful series. Apart from actually duly documenting the highlights from each of the discussions in the form of a report, in which they are also compiling, will be put up on their website in some time. Chintan has, if you can see their social media, they have simultaneously produced a library of some very hard-hitting messages, also in a fun manner, but also something that will touch you deeply. So do look them up and use them as instruments for bringing change. I think it's an open library, so everyone is welcome to use it. I think for the circular economy itself, it's going to be a lengthy struggle, and we should or we could rely on each other's support in direct or in indirect manner using our collective strength and resources. So thanks one again for joining us for all the webinars, and it's been a wonderful journey. Have a nice evening, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you, Mandvi. As
Thank
Mandvi
you.
said, do check out our website for more information on circular economy, and the links to all the seminar webinars are on Chintan YouTube channel. So please free to check them all out. Once again, thank you and have a great evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye now.
Thanks. Bye.